and it's fixed. Great. Okay, more coffee, obviously. Yeah, I spilled it. So, in terms of learning songs, the gigs that I've done over the last couple of weeks, been 2 function gigs. So, depending on the type of band that you're playing with, and whether it's that serious or not, depends on the kind of like level of difficulty that it comes to when you're trying to learn these songs and arrangements. So with the first one, it was kind of like an indie rock kind of thing. We had, usually they play for 2 hours, so but they played for an hour and 45 in the end. So I think I had about 25-ish songs to learn. Now most of these I've played before, so I already had some charts and it was about refreshing my memory, but there was a couple where there were new songs that I hadn't necessarily played live, but I did know of just from listening to music generally. So actually, learning songs like that you already know can be quite straightforward because you're familiar with at least maybe the structure, you know, the kind of cue points of like, oh, I know when the chorus is coming because there's this vocal part. So that's a helpful element of learning songs, but the actual time of like working things out can be quite time consuming. So what have I got? So here's a good example. Like the song I learnt for the gig 2 nights ago. You can't really see it so well. That's my chart. And the song is Dancing in the Moonlight by Top Loader, which is obviously like a really well-known song, at least in the UK. So I knew the song, you know, I knew of it. So basically I just did some kind of basic kind of cue points. You know, I wrote down what the kind of like main pattern is. And if the pattern changes in another section, I'd write that down as well. But I'm kind of like notating the types of sections. So like, for example, with this song, intro, verse 1, re-intro, verse 2, chorus 1, etc, etc. So I'm like naming the sections. Now people will like name sections of songs in different ways. Some people will call a middle 8 a bridge, or someone will call a pre-chorus a bridge. It's all about what you want to call it, I suppose, because at the end of the day, as long as you know what you're doing, following your own chart, as long as the other musicians around you are kind of playing the same arrangement, then it doesn't matter whether you've called it a pre or a bridge. So I've written down the section type. I've then written down the number of bars for each section, so then I can count along if I need to. Because sometimes, I mean, for example, in this song, they do an 8-bar verse, and then they do the intro again for 4 bars. And then they go back to a verse for 8 bars, and then they go straight to a chorus. So just those like slight changes that you wouldn't take note of if you were just listening to the song, because you'd be like, oh, the song is just happening. And it's just like, it would make sense in that way. But with this song, I've written all of the lengths down, and then I've got like, I use up and down arrows to notate when I'm coming in, and then also when I'm potentially coming out to then come back in again. So I use that little shorthand to let me know. And then I've written some like very, very basic drum notation, which actually, you might not know what drum notation looks like. And this doesn't look like what's written in books because it's not actually like manuscript paper. But let me hold it close to the camera and see if you can see it. Like that. And it's not going to focus, but they're just dots and crosses. It won't focus because my camera's not good enough. The camera's just not good enough for it. So I'll use that, small bits of notation, and I suppose that if you were playing guitar, you would maybe use some tabs. You might note a few tabs down. Or you'd maybe write some notes of like, remember this riff here, it's in a pentatonic scale, for example. So that is my way of notating songs quite quickly. I say quickly. It's my way of notating songs in order to learn them as quickly as possible. Now, there are some songs which are very simple, which come very quickly. But, for example, a song like All Night Long by Lionel Richie has got some really weird bits in. But when you listen to the song, you wouldn't go, oh, that's an odd bit. It's just like the music just makes sense in that way for the song. So notating that song took me longer, and then took me longer to learn, especially when I played it with a band that was playing to track. There is a lot of half bars. There's sections that are kind of like 3.5 times round instead of a full kind of 4. So the process of learning songs really does vary. But a lot of the songs that you will hear at a function or, you know, like a wedding band play are quite straightforward, because those are the popular ones. Unless you're in a very specific band, you know, you're in maybe a prog rock covers band of some kind, like a Genesis cover band. I don't know if that exists. That music's very complicated, but you're going to have a select group of people who are going to really enjoy that. But most people they want you to play the hits, and that's what you do. Now, as you kind of do more and more gigs, your repertoire just builds. And I'm finding now that, for example, the last gig I did, I only had to chart 8 songs out of 32 because I'd already charted and played the other 24 live before. And even if you don't know a song specifically, if you kind of roughly know it, there was one song we just did it on the day. We just briefly listened through on YouTube to get the feel for it, and then you just use your intuition and your experience as well. Your musical kind of brain kicks in. So that's how songs are learnt, for me anyway. I'd really like to know what other people do, because I'm sure there'll be similarities, but also like I feel like every musician must have their own shorthand, because it's not something that you teach. It's not like taught, and there's not like a standard that's accepted like across the world. It's just like, well, it's the language that you understand when you've written it down, which is good. You know, it's good to learn things off other people, that's for sure. That was cold. Now, where is my practice diary? Ah, it's over there. Now, as you might be able to see, it's quite empty from last week. It's quite embarrassing. But we can come back to, the day that's fullest is Monday. because that's when we streamed. So maybe I should take a little look at those again. Singles, doubles, paradiddles, just like we did last week. Maybe move up to 170 for the singles. Move everything up 5 BPM. I guess so. Okay, let's give it a go then. Seconds. Concentrate. Seconds. And that's 45. Now, I stopped because I was getting a bit tense in my right arm. And if you are getting too tense in a way that doesn't feel like the muscles are just working, then you should stop. And that's why I stopped at 45 seconds. I'll come back to that. But that, I think, is off the back of my muscles being a little tired from the gig a couple of days ago. And obviously, if you are right-handed, that's the hand that does the most work when you're playing songs. You know, that's the one that's on the hi-hat playing the most, typically the most amount of notes. If you're left-handed, it's obviously the other way around. But my right arm is a little tired. So maybe I should try some doubles then at 185. And if it's the same deal, then my hand gets tired, then maybe I just need to build back up with something easier. But doubles are a different thing entirely, because it's a lot of technique and it's maybe a little easier to stay relaxed because you're throwing the stick half as many times because of the technique that you use. That's 25 seconds. And half a minute. Try and keep them even. .40 seconds. Now this is more of a, I can feel the muscles working as opposed to straining. So I'll get to the end with this one, I think. 5 to go. That's 1 minute. So it's, I mean, singles is a lot more taxing physically. So just to explain why that is, when you've got a single stroke roll, so right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. Me playing it slowly there, you can see I throw the stick down and it comes back up and I get one stroke per throw, essentially. Now when you're playing double stroke rolls, typically if you're playing super slowly, you can play and throw the stick twice. But that only occurs at very slow tempos. So this is the technique, this is called open close, that you use with double stroke rolls. So you see I throw the stick down, and as I close my hand back up, I get the second stroke. 1, 2, open, close. So what that means is I'm throwing the sticks half the amount of times. compared to singles. You know, I play throwing the sticks twice, but I do singles, I throw the sticks 4 times. So it's just more repetitive and puts more strain on the muscles you're using because you're just doing it more times. Whereas if I'm playing doubles, I'm throwing the sticks half the amount of times but still getting the same amount of notes. Now, when I was like learning drums, I ignored double strokes for a long time. Just because I think it was easier for my brain to think in singles. If I could play it singles, I would do it in singles. But now, doubles are far easier. I can be more relaxed, I can play faster. Not that I play any particular styles of music that require me to play super fast. You know, I'm not in a metal band. I'm not playing any kind of like burning tempo kind of jazz stuff. I think the fastest song that we have is 163, which is called Up. And that's kind of quite relentless, and I had to like learn how to pace myself during that song. But again, I was using singles on the right hand, and it just became about stamina, really. So, where am I on paradiddles? 155. Seconds. And because paradiddles are a combination of singles and doubles, and we've got this accent, I'd probably put them in between singles and doubles in terms of how they feel and how much like muscular strain they put you under. 10 seconds to go. Now with that one, I get like tension in a different place. Like I don't get it necessarily all in this part of my forearm, which I do with singles. I actually get a little bit in my shoulder because that movement there, even if it's streamlined, I don't know. I think I just hold a bit of tension in my shoulder. Be good to get rid of it, but that's quite difficult to do. So then we've got some single stroke bursts, which we can give a go at. 102. Try a really long one. Maybe one more. Maybe one more. Okay. So with those singles, doing the bursts like that, I find that I'm trying to use a bit more of a finger technique to make that happen. Because as you play faster, you need to use a smaller gear. Like, you know, if you're playing really slow, you can play it from all the way back to your shoulder if you want. Like, all the way back. Really big strokes. But as you play faster, you've got to get back to the drum quicker. So you have to make the distance that you go from smaller. So if I want to play fast, and if I want to play slower, I can go further back. Also, then I've got, as the tempo like decreases, I've got more choices dynamically. Because I can choose to go from all the way back there, but when I'm playing fast, that dynamic range closes down a little bit. I mean, yeah, you can pull out some accents, but actually playing the whole thing really loud is quite hard to do. There is a ceiling to that. Okay, let's do some doubles at 104. And as I said before, this is more efficient in terms of the stroke. So I'm getting double the notes I would from singles by only throwing the sticks twice. Pretty good. Being made to work a little bit harder because I'm using this practice pad. I wonder what would happen if I changed to this one. Now, interestingly, that's harder for my left hand. It's almost like having the extra rebound. It's not used to that. Let's try the singles back down at 102. And my singles are just not as good. They're just not as good. So I probably need to pull the tempo down a little bit. Because actually, struggling at a higher tempo probably just won't be too helpful. Especially when my right arm is just struggling a little bit. That's something I do as well. Like, I'll stretch as I go, especially if stuff starts to feel a little bit tight and I'm not necessarily getting the best out of my body in that way, because drums is more of a sport than it is an instrument sometimes. That's why it's a young man's game. Definitely. There's a lot of young drummers out there that can do a lot of stuff that the older guys can't. You know, just physically speaking, there are limitations. And that's enough rudiments really for now. I'll definitely come back to them because I didn't really do the singles. Let's go and play some jazz, I think. Let's get back to the art of bop drumming, as always, on our practice stream. And if you've just joined us, I've just been doing rudiments on my practice pad for probably about almost 40 minutes. I'm just going to squeeze in some jazz brushes stuff from this book. Let's find out where I got to last time. I've just written down that I just did it. Didn't necessarily do a tempo, but this said start at 100. So that's probably where I did start. So maybe let's go up to 110. Stick that down there. Now, I would absolutely love to play in a jazz band, but I'm just not good enough yet. I mean, that's my own perception. I could definitely just blag it, that's for sure. Quiet. And that's the first page. Goodness. Let's put this on as well. Okay, let's go over the second page of this. Comp example 1. Ooh. I think that's how it goes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Goodness. Now, I definitely realised halfway through that my posture's not very good when it comes to playing jazz. I don't know whether that's tiredness from sitting on my indoor bike for ages yesterday or loading stuff in and out of my van. But maybe I just need to sit up a little bit straighter. Now, there's such a huge difference between pop music and jazz. Like, a huge difference. It's so, like, jazz can be incredibly complicated, but can also have some of the most pop melodies as well. You know, in terms of pop as in popular, not necessarily as pop as in Sabrina Carpenter. Pop as in popular, because some of those melodies from some of the most famous jazz standards are so singable. And actually, some of them could be referred to as pop songs in the popular culture kind of way. But jazz contains so much like four-way coordination and interdependence between all four of the limbs. Obviously, I'm just doing the hand stuff right now. If I was sat at the kit, I'd be using my left foot on beats 2 and 4, and I'd maybe be playing a bass drum on every beat, or I'd maybe even be doing some other rhythms to complement the things that my hands were doing. So, but then the thing is you if you steer so much into jazz, you can lose some of the kind of intensity and the consistency, I think, that some pop drummers will have. And I think and pop musicians just across the board on all instruments, I'd say. I think that there are a lot of jazz drummers out there who can do the pop thing, that's for sure, and also the rock thing, etc. There's a great guy called Grayson Recruitman who like kind of rose up on social media like doing kind of Buddy Rich big band covers, like in a full suit in a practice room, like in New Jersey where he lived, I think. And then has subsequently kind of, he also like huge metal fan and can play all the double kick stuff as well. And now he plays with Sepultura, and it's like, well, I mean, he did. I think he still does to an extent. I'm not sure whether he'll be moving on anytime soon, but you know, he did a bit with Trivium when they needed a drummer as well, and it's like he can do all of it. But the kind of coordination parts of jazz, coordinate all four limbs, kind of has a parallel but in metal music in the way that you're coordinating all four limbs a lot of the time, playing quite complex coordination patterns. Maybe I'll just improvise for a little bit. Now, I was just figuring some stuff out as I was playing along there, and one of the things I was doing was, instead of playing like, let's take this pattern for example. Now I'm playing all of those accents as kind of hits, but what I can do, especially with the left, like particularly with the left hand, is the left hand accents I could play, instead of playing a hit like that, I could play it as more of a accentuated sweep. So it just has a completely different feel to it. And when I was improvising, those little sweeps can be quite expressive, especially if you don't want to play. You don't want to pull the accent out as much. That was something that I was thinking of. And then I was thinking, as I was sweeping, I could play like a 2-part to break it up. Which creates a completely different sound. It kind of stops the sweep, creates naturally a bit of tension because there's a kind of pause. And there's so many ways you can create tension in music. It's whether you're using pitch, so increasing the pitch or decreasing the pitch of something, like the amount of notes you're playing, so the speed. The volume. Or by stopping, adding a gap. Just adds a little break. Now, I've never seen that in a book. Someone's probably written it down in a book because it feels quite natural. But I just did it myself. And I guess that's the thing with jazz because, well, like when you're playing a jazz song with a band, so you'll decide on the tune that you're playing. So the person who's playing the lead instrument will typically call the tune because they're the one who's responsible for playing the melody in like the kind of opening part of the song and usually the closing part of the song. So if they just call the tune, but they will pick a song that they kind of know and everyone will be like, okay, do we all know that? But for like drums and bass specifically, those instruments that aren't playing lead parts, you often won't necessarily know the song. So when you go to like Ronnie Scott's Jam Night, for example, most people on stage won't know the song that they're about to play, which is fairly mental when you take a step back and think about it. It's like, oh, so no one actually knows what they're doing until they start, and then they just figure it out. I guess that's such another thing about jazz that makes it more complex from just kind of your straight ahead pop and rock music, because those are quite, I mean, jazz has a formula in some aspects, but pop songs and rock songs are more formulaic in the way that they're structured. But when people get on stage and play jazz tunes, no time that they play a song through is exactly the same, because what happens is they'll play the beginning of the song, which typically is structured. Often you'll follow an A-A-B-A structure. So you play the A section once, twice, then the B section, then the A section again. That's usually what's called the head of the tune. So you'll play that, and then what happens for X amount of time, because it depends on how many people were on stage, how many people want to solo, you will then solo for X amount of time before coming back to the head of the tune to finish it off and follow that A-A-B-A structure again. Now there are other structures within jazz, but the AABA form is the most common and most well used. So when you see jazz musicians play, they don't know what they're doing. They are literally just making it up as they go along, which is really quite scary when you think about it. Because, I mean, I'm a novice when it comes to jazz. I know a lot about it. Doesn't mean I'm necessarily the best player, right? But I went to a jam night one time and I just had to get up there and play. They asked, they were like, what song do you want to play? And I was like, anything that swings, please. So we played a swing tune, and it was AABA. They didn't tell me that, but you just figure out by listening. I did take a solo, I think, which again was mental because I hate drum solos. But in jazz, it feels more accessible, I think, because it's not like, okay, here comes the drum solo. Everyone walks off stage for 5 minutes in the kind of like rock and metal way. I think that it just feels like it's more part of the song. So I felt like I could just do it. But I did solo, and then we played the head of the tune again, and then we finished. And I made the whole thing up. Didn't follow anything. Just used kind of instinct and, obviously we'll have played a lot of the patterns that are in this book, that I practiced. So I had practiced some parts, but I was making it up as I went along the whole way through. And everything I do, unless I'm following an exercise, are there any cues at all? Or is it completely made up? I mean, so you'll have typically you'll have a band leader who is kind of like policing the whole thing in a way. So they might cue a section. They might be like, okay, well, we're going to go back to the head. But obviously they might be playing, so they won't necessarily be able to tell you. You have to be looking around at people and taking cues from people. And it's the same when you do like a function gig that you're depping on, just like I did the other day. I was looking around all the time. I wasn't concentrating on playing the drums. I was just looking around to figure out where we were going. And I think that happens quite a lot with jazz. It's about communication, really. So there are cues, but the actual content of the solos made up. They're following a chord structure, but they're just playing whatever notes they like. Definitely. It's a very good question, though. So I think I'll just come back around for another few minutes, do my rudiments before we finish. Obviously a bit shorter today because I've got annoying things to do. Can't just sit here and play drums and speak to people. So if I go back to the singles, doubles, paradiddles, brilliant. And let's try 170 again with the single strokes, see if I can do it. That's a minute. That got hard. It got hard at the point where I stopped last time, which is an improvement, that's for sure. maybe my right arm actually needed longer to warm up today instead of a shorter amount of time, like I said. Okay, what we got next? 185 for doubles. Left hand lead this time. Left hand does not like it as much as the right. Well, I did it, that's for sure. Okay, let's do paradiddles just to close out our practice this morning. And thank you very much, everyone, for joining. I hope you learned something new, and I hope maybe if you are a musician, you were practicing along as well, just having me yapping away in the background. Okay, let's go. Nice. I'm not as bad as I thought. That's nice. That's always good. It's always good to finish on something like that. Actually feeling like I've improved since last week, despite doing no practice. I mean, it's not the way to do it, everyone. But yeah, thank you very much for joining me on a Monday morning. I'm assuming it's cold and wet. It usually is. And the picture's back, great. So yeah, thank you for coming along, chatting away. And I'll see you next week. I'm thinking of maybe doing some different types of streaming, kind of during the week. Maybe looking at some musical director stuff, how I build kind of show files and song arrangements. If anyone's interested in that. But yeah. Jargo, good to see you. Hope you enjoyed, mate. So yeah. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.